Welcome back to the Personal Finance Project. Today, Scott and I are joined once again by Justin Nichols. Justin has been in the business for almost 30 years now, and you've been at Baird since 2018? 2019. So we thought we would begin this episode by doing a bit of like a state of the union or state of affairs with the economy, kind of where we're at with tariffs and inflation and all that kind of good stuff. So Justin, I know that you had some ideas with tariffs and why they exist and why the economy hasn't blown up as some people feared it might. And Scott and I are very intrigued to get kind of your thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I think when President Trump took over, the number one priority they were most concerned with is debt, right? Mm-hmm. If you look at the national tax receipts, and we follow strategics every day and look at those kind of things, I think it's basically 18% of the federal take-in was going just to pay the interest on the debt, which is really kind of super concerning. So if you think it's your personal house, if 18% of your money just went to pay the credit card just to stay even, it'd be pretty miserable, right?
Well, I've got 7 kids, so
yeah,
we're about
kids,
right there.
You could get there. But anyway, and I think a big part of that was, how do we pay that down? And 2 ways that we're trying to do it. Obviously, you can increase tax receipts. People don't really love that, especially when the 17 bill was already passed. Mm-hmm. So they extended that with the big, beautiful bill. But the other thing is tariffs and revenue, right? And how to increase that revenue. And if you track that, you're seeing anywhere from $30 to $35 billion of new revenue coming into the Treasury's coffers every month. That's actually going towards paying down the debt. Now, I think one thing that's people have kind of lost focus on is energy prices, right? How do we offset increases and all the other stuff? And if we look at like gasoline prices compared to a year and a half ago, they're much lower. And people kind of have choices of what the things they want to buy. When he made that comment about like, oh, maybe you buy less dolls, like Chinese dolls or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's true, because you kind of go from a thing where you have choices to buy things versus necessities, right? So the core things that you can't control is getting down energy prices as a consumer and groceries, the basics, right? So I think that's where the focus has been. And the offsets of some of that cost is probably, I don't know for a fact, I guess we'll have to let it completely pay out, but I would suggest that AI is probably offsetting some of those companies' costs. And I bet there were some hard talks between the administrations and companies. Hey, let's not pass this on to some of these consumers because we know you guys are saving money that way. But, look, hey, we got a long way from completing this deal. Generally speaking, I'm pretty encouraged with what's going on in the markets, meaning like a flat pause right here is not bad. When we think about August and September, really traditionally bumpy months, right?
Yeah.
Usually we come at October, November, December with our rallies. But if we stay flat here, I would consider that a win.
I tend to agree with you. A couple of thoughts that came up. One, I think, if we kind of look at the situation, especially with the energy and politics, it seems to me, and maybe I'm reading the tea leaves wrong here, but it seems like even people on the left are maybe coming to terms with the fact that with AI's, rise over the last couple of years, that we're going to need a lot of energy, and solar and wind and hydro are not going to do it all. And so it seems to me like people are coming to terms with, at absolute minimum, natural gas.
Right.
On that front.
No doubt about it. You look at these data centers, and we talked about this in detail. I talk about this with Max Mann all the time on the SAM team. The reality is they just need a ton of energy. They need natural gas, water, all that stuff. You're seeing one big plant built outside of Monroe, Louisiana by Facebook, right? Because they got access to natural gas and water. So all those things, like you're even seeing shifts of people's inner core political views towards a pro-energy group a little bit, because these same guys that might have hated it and told you to drive an EV 5 years ago now need natural gas for their data center. So all this is kind of coming into play. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. Pretty good stuff for Texas, though.
Yeah, I would think so too. Question on the tariffs, and we've spent quite a bit of time talking about tariffs in a couple other episodes. Do you think that behind the scenes there was a thought, all right, maybe the tariffs slow the economy down just enough to help us with the idea of cutting rates? Or do you think that they were hoping we can do the tariffs, increase revenue, still cut rates, not get inflation?
I think it's the latter for sure. I think the primary goal was certainly to raise revenue and try to cut rates to cut the interest that the federal government owes. Again, I kept saying, I don't think the Treasury Secretary, his main focus is like, how do we get this number manageable? How do we make this more under control? How do we live with that? Because we think about it again, like if our kid ran up a $50,000 credit card bill and had 18% interest on that, we're like, wow, this is not good, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the primary focus, and you can't get more growth while you have all that debt that you're stacking against. And we're kind of, as a country, kind of getting where we're at the breaking point. You're like, hey, I'm going to keep you lending money because you buy my products, right? And that's what Europe and China and all that that kind of stuff did. But we had to say as a nation, enough's enough, I think.
No, and I tend to agree with you. I mean, it seems to me like we were basically at the inflection point where you say, we're actually going to work on this, or we're just going to either admit that we're at some point going to inflate our way out of it, which doesn't work for anybody.
Unpopular.
It's extremely unpopular. But I think you're right. What we're trying to do is grow our way out of it, being a little bit more responsible on the front end.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I think we made a note here where you have a group of resources in the United States. It's the productive capacity of everybody who's working largely in the knowledge sector. That's really the people who are going to be squeezed in order to get this debt paid down. And I think what your point was, raising taxes on your most productive members, as the state of New Jersey found out when their highest income taxpayer, they just left. Not a really popular political strategy. But like Scott mentioned with AI, if you can get incrementally more productivity out of your already very productive members of society, where you can take a similar share in taxes as was before, like 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, they extended those rates. But if everybody's making a little bit more money, then you're still raising revenues to the government without doing so in a very unpopular confiscatory way.
Yeah, and I think we got a little unknown help. Like what I mean by that is like Russia invading Ukraine, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Put a lot of pressure on Europe to say, come to the table with us and say, hey, like these tariff things, yeah, you guys might not like that. You also need us to defend you, right? And the Russians are knocking on your door in Ukraine, could come right through like kind of World War II style like they did before. So that made everybody more, helping and willing to work with each other a little bit more on some of those things, I think. And in the past, maybe they wouldn't have. But, some of these things about getting, like Germany to put GDP towards, their own defense, all those kind of things are really mechanism. All the deals going on in Iran. Maybe the Saudis maybe want to help us out a little bit on our inflation deal by pumping a lot of oil and bringing gas prices down. So I think it's a little bit of political, things that are going on and making some of these things come together a little bit at the same time.
Well, and I don't track debt in the EU as a matter of course, but it does seem to me like you've got these stagnant economies that haven't been growing in years, like decades, really at this point. If they spend more on energy, then it seems to me like they could grow a little bit because they're probably going to still spend what they were going to otherwise. So if they're increasing the defense spending, velocity of currency, it hopefully gets some growth out of those places.
I mean, you think about Germany, for example, they never like to take on any debt, right? So that's their whole deal. They live like much more like we do in the stateside, United States, like state of Texas has to run by a budget. Germany really believed that. But look, again, when you have the Russians knocking at your door and making that threat, right? Well, maybe we need to spend some money on defense. So I think that all that is related, and how it all plays out, none of us knows. But that's why we're in the business.
Yeah. So, Justin, just kind of curious, you mentioned AI a little bit earlier, or what are you thinking in terms of, do you think there's some, utility that's going to come out of this that's really going to improve productivity? I know you kind of talk a lot about productivity and getting the most out of your workforce. Do you think we've seen it? Do you think it's ChatGPT, or is there something else out there?
Oh, I mean, I just think it's the ability for people to connect with the people they actually want to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And know who their target audience is. We get all these pop-ups on our phones all the time now, like, hey, how did they hear that, right? And it's kind of annoying, it's kind of creepy and all that stuff is, but the reality of is if your target sales, right, now you know who you can go after. And now kind of screening out what those people should look like. I was talking to my best friend growing up, Cliff Gobert, State Farm guy in South Carolina the other day. And he said like his young son goes to Clemson, came and cold called for him all summer. And he's like, was just amazed at the job he did. He goes, Justin, is actually easier than ever because they don't have to guess. We kind of got a good idea who we're going after and what we're going after. And if you're really good and you really want to put in the work, it's better than ever. So that's an interesting thing, like a different interesting take for sure.
Yeah, I feel like there's still a lot of progress to be made with AI with respect to that, because I was joking with Hannah the other day. We were leaving the office and said, I bought this book called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott on Amazon. And now Amazon is flooding my reading recommendations with all bird books.
Yeah.
It's like, well, the book Bird by Bird is really more of like a work of philosophy. And so it's like Anne Lamott's basically like, here, if you want to have a successful life, here are some of the things that you can do and some of the practices you can engage in. And now it's like, you're really into ornithology, aren't you? And it's like, no, I'm not
had a
actually.
Quick thought, but I don't want to do birds every day.
Yeah, so I was like, it's not even a book about birds. So part of me sees like there's a company out there called United Therapeutics. This is not our explicit recommendation. They're working on taking stem cells and 3D printing organs And so to address the organ rejection problem. So
Yeah.
essentially the idea would be take your own stem cells, they bring it in, they can print you out a kidney. This is a kidney your body is very unlikely to reject because it was actually made from your cells. That is happening. Meanwhile, Amazon is still sending me bird recommendations. So it's like AI in one sense is unbelievably productive and is going to solve some unbelievably intractable problems. But on the other hand, you think, wow, I'm still getting bird recommendations from Amazon, one of the premier companies in the United States, clearly one of the primary users of AI. So I have this sort of mixed feeling about how good it is right now.
I think another point on that is, are we hurting ourselves long term if we rely too much on AI?
Possibly, for sure.
I think
and we're seeing that a lot with, I have all these kids that are just graduating college that went to high school with my kids, and really, really smart kids, and they're having trouble just getting entry-level jobs now. And that's really, really concerning because, like, you say, oh, congratulations, company. You saved money on all this administrative costs, and you got these people that can do it. But here's your problem. Where are you going to be 5 or 6 years from now when you need that guy to be the guy? And they didn't get all that training and learning and all that kind of stuff. And that's where we're really at these inflection points. It's like, hey, it's good, but it's not great. And it's never great when young people don't get mentored, right? So that's kind of the challenge I see.
And I think specific to that, I've recently heard about this study they did. I think it was in Germany, where they gave AI to a bunch of GI doctors, gastrointestinal doctors, and they did colonoscopies, and the AI showed them where the polyps were. And then like a month later, they took away the AI. And in that short amount of time, they got significantly worse at identifying polyps on their own.
Right. So they're no longer repping it out, right?
Yeah.
It's just like anything else, like sports, baseball, football. You rep it out and you continue. And in a GI world, if you don't look at them every day, you lose track, and that's not good.
Well, that was something Scott and I spoke briefly with. We had Joe Hodas from the SAM team on the podcast in a previous episode. And I said, how many Peltzman effects might we see as a consequence of AI? Whereas as Scott's pointing out, it's like we grow accustomed to the AI doing these things for us, but we take compensatory risk because we think, oh, well, the AI can't be wrong. Like it's not going to lead me astray on my distribution strategy for my IRA and retirement. Like it can't be wrong.
It can.
So, and it can, and it has been. Lawyers discovered when they had them writing their briefs that it hallucinated precedent. And said these cases, and they found out these cases don't exist, but that was a human being with closely scrutinizing the record as only a human being could do to recognize where this thing had come up short. And Scott and I have played with these tools and said, hey, here's a basic client. How should they distribute their assets? And often it will do very strange things like, well, we're going to take all the money out of the Roth IRA first.
Yeah.
And you're like,
no, we aren't.
Whoa. Yeah. Like, why would we be doing that? So
well, I think it's like anything else. It's like, you can do it, but guess what? There's no human emotion. Right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, human emotion is all about investing. When you think about it, like, oh my God, you can look at everything rationally. If I look at these numbers from a 10, 5, 15 years numbers, they all look great. But in those 15 years, there was a COVID, there was a 2018, there was all these things like make you want to vomit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And AI doesn't have the vomit part.
No, it doesn't. And it's funny. Out of all this stuff, I saw this list of like 20 jobs that AI is going to maybe not put out of business, but it's really going to impact. A threat.
Yeah.
We were on there, and of those jobs, I wasn't particularly concerned because it cannot handle the panic. It can't handle, I am freaking out right now. Am I going to be able to stay retired and have that conversation?
Yeah.
So,
and I
we
think
spit through that a little bit of that this year already, right? Well, we went through in April. I mean, you talk about a 17, 18% drop and 7 to 8 trading days. Like that'll get anyone's attention. Okay.
And I think it's a mistake to have, inefficiencies that you see in investing to put that in the problem of people just don't have quite enough information. It's like, oh no. People are swimming in information. If we could solve problems with information, everybody would be skinny. Nobody would be divorced. The world would be working perfectly because all of the information you could want on any given topic is literally at your fingertips in most of the developed world. And yet people still make these sorts of errors or inefficiencies or irrational decisions. And I kind of have an issue with irrationality to begin with, but they make these kinds of errors all the time. And the thing that you kept returning to in the last time we had you on the podcast was, what is it that you are hiring your advisor to do? Yes, we're going to do some comprehensive planning, but more importantly than that, I am here to keep you in the fairway.
Correct.
Because you're going to be distracted by shiny objects. You're going to want to get to the green in 1, but there's a sand trap or a water hazard right behind it. And we're saying, get to the green in 2 or maybe 3. Let's play, as Richard liked to call it, little old lady golfing. We're going to try to hit it right down the middle of the fairway every time.
Every time. And I think that's the hardest part about investing in general, and controlling those emotions, controlling the unknown. Because the only thing we know for sure, we say this over and over and over to the client, we're preparing you for the crisis, because there will be one
Mhm.
with a different title. Okay.
Mhm.
And it'll always be different. Oh, this one's different. This one's worse. This one, and they all feel the same. Then feel, I always compare it to like when my high school coach made me go run the 400, right? Like, hey, coach, I don't have a chance here, right? Like I'm going to get killed here, right?
I'm going to get smoked.
It's got the butterflies in my stomach. Well, that's what a correction feels like, and especially for retirees. And if you haven't gone through a correction as a retiree, when you're no longer getting a paycheck, it's a different type of getting ready to run that 400. It's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, that's kind of my take on all that, but it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. Well, another topic that we wanted to discuss with you while you were on was the importance of succession planning with respect to when a person is hiring a financial advisor, hiring a team of advisors, why this is really maybe an intangible or perhaps tangible asset that prospective clients should be paying close attention to.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting topic, because when I was younger, I really wasn't as enthusiastic about that, right? Because I thought I kind of know what's best. I know how to do this play. I don't really trust these people to run the play. And as I've gotten older, you're kind of more like a head coach. You're like, you got all these lieutenants underneath you. You need to mentor these people, but they can assist and help you run those plays. And when I look at it as somebody my age in the 50s now, like, hey, great, Justin, I appreciate your experience. I appreciate everything that you've gone through, but like, you might not be here forever, right? And so the most important thing is like, what's our succession plan if that's the case, right? And the great news about hiring the 3 young people I have on my team, Angela, Trey, and Bo, is the fact that these guys all 3 of them are really, really bright. All 3 of them have their own unique skills and talents, and they all fit into what we're trying to do. But they have me to mentor, coach them, and I get to walk down the hall and speak to folks like your dad and coach me up on all the things that I need to learn, okay? And the clients know that regardless what happens, is they've got a process that's going to carry them through, and they got a team that's going to carry them through for whatever phases that they go through and whatever phases our team goes through. So I think that's like kind of the most important thing. And by the way, like just sitting in here with you guys, I learn a lot, right? And obviously, hopefully you learn something from me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But the ignorance of the whole senior deal is people think they can't learn from the younger folks, that we know it all model. And the play changes all the time. And if you don't adjust to the play, you're going to be left behind. So that's kind of how we view it. And I think it's the right path.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, because one of the things I tell people a lot in this industry is you are not going to be, you're not going to know everything. It's just impossible to follow every company or ETF or stock or whatever it's going to be.
Tax code.
Yeah. But beyond that, because this is a relationship business, you're not always going to be everybody's cup of tea. Right. To be honest with you, like some of my favorite clients, maybe Greg just doesn't quite work for them, and vice versa, where like they really have a connection with Greg and I'm just some guy. And that's totally fine, because we're all on a team and we're working towards the same thing. And I think what you're describing also, one thing that I really like about it is you're creating a culture where everybody has responsibility from a very early stage.
Correct.
Because I think one of the mistakes a lot of financial advisors can make in, building out a team is they have a bunch of people on the team with no cards on the table.
Correct.
Or no stakes, no skin in the game.
Yeah.
Thank you for the expression.
I
appreciate that.
One of the things that I think is a good for our industry is there seems to be 2 pretty strong undercurrents. And one of which is a movement away from transaction-based relationships and toward comprehensive financial planning relationships where a person's acting in a fiduciary capacity, largely on a fee-based kind of arrangement. I think that's got some problems to it, obviously, but I think that's been a general good. But the other undercurrent is teaming, where you're seeing the old but the old way of doing the old way of I would say the old way of doing business, where you had the silver-haired guy who has got 100 or 150 relationships where they have relied solely on him or her for all of their financial planning needs. He might have an assistant, maybe 2 if he's lucky. And when he decides to hang it up, these people are sort of left in the lurch, where now the person likely taking over their business is just either their advisor found a person who was willing to buy their book, or it's just going to be like, we're going to reassign you within the branch and hopefully you get somebody who knows what they're doing. And I think a lot of clients are looking for the continuity of service. They're saying, yeah, like Scott said, we really appreciate that you have all, or like you said, we appreciate you have all this experience, but who's going to come next? Because I'm a fresh retiree. I might only be 55, 56, 57 years old. And if you're my age, well, I imagine you're going to want to retire from your business at some point, maybe sooner rather than later. So what kind of generational capacity do you have on the team so that I don't experience some major discontinuity of service right when I'm going to need it the most?
Yeah, and to that point, I think it's so important to keep your team organized, right?
Uh-huh.
And meaning that your team is on these appointments. And I don't ever believe, and your team has incentive on this team. Your team is a piece of the pie. Because you get away from that, it's going to be a real problem. Because anytime that the entire team is surrounded this relationship, everybody knows the relationship. They know the emotional tilt of this person. We had a prospect in our office the other day, kind of broke down, tearful, crying, and talking about his wife and his daughter and the whole 9 yards. Pretty emotional, right? So like everybody on the team needs to understand that. You know what that tells me? Like, hey, this guy means the world to him, but guess what? When the market corrects, he's going to be emotional too,
Yeah.
right? And so we as a team always have to understand that and always try to put people first and make sure that, everybody has the humility to be on the team, right?
Yeah.
And that starts with me, right? And it starts with heading the team and the whole 9 yards. But we're lucky at Baird, that's the whole core value of this company, right? We have this no jerk rule, I don't want to say the other word, but you know what I'm saying. But the main thing is it's really, really important that everybody feels included and no one has this arrogant appeal. Because as soon as you get arrogant is when things get off track real quick.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. As soon as you feel like you know everything, that's when you're about to discover that you certainly don't.
Yeah. And then this business, just in general, because you're dealing with the economy all the time, one thing's for certain, we're all going to be humbled.
Yeah, you have to be.
Yeah.
And, one last thing kind of on that, having some skin in the game and building something that makes sense. Greg, you mentioned that, say the old structure was your advisor works for a very long time and then they go away and then you're just kind of left in the lurch and you either get assigned somebody or who knows. Now, we've got the crazy stuff of like, there's a bunch of private equity in this industry.
Yeah, buying up these practices.
Yeah, like there's people kind of coming in and buying up practices. So another question to ask is, does my advisor, one, have skin in the game, and two, are they still motivated the same way, or did they kind of sell out to a private equity or something like that?
And that's creating a whole new basket of perverse incentives that maybe we can get. Maybe it's beyond the scope of this conversation, but I think it's a really great point. Is knowing. Maybe the duty of the client extends beyond just knowing about your advisor and his background, but more about what are your incentives,
right. And do you still own the firm? Do you control the firm? Do you control the products of the firm? Do you control the asset management of the firm? Are you getting the best menu like we have at Baird? We're very confident about that. I don't know. Those are all the questions I'd be asking if I was a client, right?
Yeah.
And like, are you still motivated? Okay. And what's that look like? And so I think all that's really important. And I think like the RIA space is huge and blah, blah, blah.
It's growing fast.
It's growing fast. But, obviously the capabilities that is individually driven and are those firms the same firm? And no one knows to know. It's kind of like buying a suit at one store and you got the same suit, but you bought it from another store, but 3 different labels, like it's just hard to keep up with all that. And I think people really need to ask those questions and find out.
Another thing that's pretty near and dear to me, obviously, is a lot of businesses like this have family businesses. So I know that's something that you're structured on your team. Obviously, it's something structured on my team. Like some people take issue with nepotism. I think it's worked out okay, from my perspective. From my perspective, and that's the thing is people will often levy that, and it's a rather banal. Like I think that it's going to roll right off of Bo. It's going to roll right off of Trey. It's stuck to me apparently because I'm talking about it now. But
who's that guy that said I love me some me?
Yeah, exactly. But the way that I had started to think about this was I think pretty rigorous thinkers might see a family business and they think, you know what? Yeah, maybe there could be a little bit of an element of nepotism. There's certainly an element of truth to that. That's fine. However, what we've established now on our team and what you're establishing on your team is you and your descendants, you have an informal link that is way beyond transactional. So when you move on to the next thing, what I like to tell clients about our practice is Richard may leave Baird, but he will never be retired.
No doubt.
Because as long as I'm working in this business, as long as Hannah's working in this business, it's like, you know what? If I do something disappointing at work, it also comes home with me.
Yeah.
So
Follow the trail, right?
clients can rest assured that I am not just looking for the highest bidder for their business, because you would treat a house that your dad built very differently than one you bought from a stranger, and you'd certainly treat it differently than one you were renting. So it's like, I'm not renting this business. It's like, this was business that was grown by the sweat and blood of somebody who I have a relationship with.
Yeah, kind of a funny thing if you think about that kind of slight, if you're making it towards like you or somebody else in this business, is I feel like for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, when it was stuff like being a cobbler or a Fletcher or something like that, family business was seen as like the greatest thing in the world.
Because you had an apprentice.
Nobody
put a
told the
tie
farmer
on.
not to hire his kid, right?
No.
I mean, seriously.
You put a tie on and it looks really bad.
Yeah, but it's like
kind of weird.
And the thing that Richard talks about all the time is, and something you alluded to, was bringing back real apprenticeships. And mine just happens to be 33 years long at this point. So it's like you're getting a person who is really getting a deep appreciation for the business, but they're also getting a deep appreciation for how a person who is in this business ought to conduct their affairs outside of the office. So it's saying Richard is giving advice to people in our office at Baird generally, and other people just drift into the office. They end up with Richard because he has conducted himself in a way that has been successful, not just with financial planning, but in his marriage, with his children, I like to think.
Right.
And so people are asking him for advice, but it doesn't take long to where they've transcended just business advice, and it's turned into life advice.
Correct.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say one final thought on that. I can also just tell you, absent mentorship, as somebody who came into this industry trying to do it themselves and knock on doors and cold called and all that stuff, if you don't have a mentor, your job is 100% sales. And so you don't have time to learn as much because all you can think about is getting in front of people to try to sell them investments.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's not a great strategy long term. Sure.
Long term, I mean, you have to do it at the beginning, but I just think that people like myself and Bo and Greg are so much better prepared because they don't have to sell 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
No, then no doubt. And you guys have been fortunate in that regard that y'all had the great mentor in Richard to slowly ramp up, right? And get all the proper credentials behind you. I think it's a little bit like, think about it from a football terminology. You got a guy like Nick Saban and all these lieutenants like the University of Texas guy, Georgia guy, Kirby Smart, and all these guys. You guys are so lucky because you kind of get to be coordinators before you become head coaches. And one day you will be a head coach. But guess what? I'm just trying to loop onto the staff any way I can to learn as much as I can. And to have someone like that, we're seeing this right now. Like, we've been out of the office for a month. Like, hey, you ask Trey, hey, what do you miss the most about not being in the office? He goes, I miss being around you. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the most awesome thing that anybody can say. When your team feels that way, that's the ultimate compliment.
Yeah. I mean, one of the stories that I love is the story of In-N-Out Burger. It's a little burger joint people might have heard of. It started out in California. The man who started
they have
it.
one in Katy, right?
They do. They have one in Katy now. They have one that's not too far from here. Guy started it. He got to about 18 stores, and he unfortunately passed away when he was in his 60s, so prematurely. His son picked up the ball, started running it down the field, grew the business a lot. He had another son who was regarded as a bit of a ne'er-do-well written into this book. Like, he just never really seemed to appreciate the business or get it. He seemed to use the business as an ATM, or at least that was the perception. But then primary son dies in a plane crash. Crazy story. Other son picks up the ball, starts running it, and he does a hell of a good job.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of people who are working in the business, seeing how this stuff actually works, they have real life experience. They might be better suited to do the things that you're hiring them to do than you think, even if your first impression of them isn't as impressive as you would like it to be, because they are in the midst of an apprenticeship. Right. You know, like if anybody's expecting Scott and I to be Richard Ashcroft or Justin Nichols tomorrow, they're going to be sorely disappointed. But if they give us the opportunity to work on their stuff in parallel with people with your experience for 5 or 10 years, they might be pretty pleasantly surprised by how much we're going to pick up during that time.
Yeah, and I think that we can wrap this up on this segment, but I think the great In-N-Out story is how you should build out your team. The one particular son, he really wasn't motivated, right, until he had ownership.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And when everybody on the entire team at every level of the team has revenue share, ownership, that's the difference in the whole deal.
Yeah.
Like, we're lucky at Baird. Most people don't realize that but we're employee owned, meaning that 85% of the time you talk to someone, there's skin in the game, right? And I think that's the same way here at the local level in Houston.
Yeah.
So, Justin, going back to your Nick Saban comment, Greg, you may not have an opinion here, but who you got this season?
University of Texas.
Not LSU?
I love LSU. Arch Manny's going to be a great football player.
My wife would be offended if I didn't agree with you.
So that's just the way it goes sometimes. Hey, coaching's all about players. Trust me.
That's very true.
Well, I really thought that was a productive episode. I think that there's a lot of really good gems kind of embedded there. Wherever you're listening or watching to this, please please subscribe, and stay tuned for future episodes.
Justin, thanks so much.
No problem.
Strategis, a Baird company.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Personal Finance Project. This show would not exist without the help of our brilliant creative director, Kira Minifield. Kira, thank you for everything you do to keep this show running. On to the disclosures. This broadcast contains the current opinions of the hosts and are subject to change. The broadcast is provided for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice or recommendations. Investors should obtain professional advice before making investment decisions. This is not a complete analysis of every material fact regarding any company, industry, or security. The information has been obtained from sources we consider to be reliable but cannot guarantee their accuracy. Robert W. Baird & Co. Incorporated is not a legal or tax services provider, and you are strongly encouraged to seek the advice of the appropriate professional advisors before taking any action. For more information about any companies discussed, please contact Baird. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and diversification does not ensure a profit or protect against loss. All investments carry some level of risk, including loss of principal. An investment cannot be made directly in an index. Investors should consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of a fund carefully before investing. This and other information is found in the prospectus and summary prospectus. For a prospectus, please contact your financial professional and read it carefully before investing. Annuities carry unique risks, including market risk, investment risk, and claims-paying abilities of the insurer. There may also be instances where a contract will pay out less than the premiums paid or expire within the lifetime of the insured. There may be penalties for early withdrawal, and they are not insured by the FDIC because they are insurance, not an investment. Investors should consider carefully information contained in the prospectus or, if available, the summary prospectus, including investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses. You can request a prospectus by reaching out to your financial advisor. Please read the prospectus carefully before investing. Investment returns will fluctuate and are subject to market volatility, so that an investor's shares, when redeemed or sold, may be worth more or less than their original cost. Unlike mutual funds, shares of ETFs are not individually redeemable directly with the ETF. Shares of ETFs are bought and sold at market price, which may be higher or lower than the net asset value, NAV. Baird does not issue or underwrite mortgages and does not service mortgage lending services. Any references to mortgages in the financial services offerings are purely intended to convey an engagement in this holistic planning process, with this as one piece of the larger picture, which may or may not apply to all clients. This broadcast may not be reproduced without express permission of Robert W. Baird & Co. Incorporated.